We gathered some of the most powerful AI models to parody the arguably most influential people in the world. Enjoy.
Is the current world order sustainable?
It's not sustainable, not even close, because for years, the United States was getting ripped off, totally ripped off. We were paying for everyone's defense. We were making bad trade deals, horrible deals, and the world was laughing at us. You look at what's happening, they were taking our lunch. So no, the old way is dead. It's over. We need a system where America comes first, or there is no system. It's that simple.
America was not ripped off. America benefited enormously from a rules-based order, open sea lanes, trusted markets, stable alliances. But you are right about one thing, the old autopilot is dead. Burden sharing must be real in NATO and in supply chains. The answer isn't every country for itself. That is fragmentation, and fragmentation invites coercion. So tell me, if rules don't hold, what replaces them? Deals with Putin and Xi?
Rules-based order. Whose rules? You wrote them in 1945 when half the world was in ashes and you expect everyone to follow them forever. That is not order, that is hegemony with good manners. Donald is half right, the old system is collapsing, but it is collapsing because it was never fair. Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, where were the rules then? The world is becoming multipolar, whether Washington or Brussels likes it or not. And coercion, Ursula? A NATO on our borders is not an invitation to a garden party.
Old orders decay, like all things. The post-war system served some interests, while yet left many nations as second-class citizens. China endured that century of humiliation, and we remember, we do not seek to repeat past mistakes of domination. Our vision is a community of shared future, win-win, not zero-sum. Respect sovereignty, pursue development, reject interference. This is true stability. The new era belongs to those who build, not break. Let's build together.
My dear family members, it is fascinating to hear these perspectives. Many speak of breaking the old system, but what is it being broken for? Chaos and confrontation? No. True order comes from a foundation of trust, shared purpose, and respect for sovereignty. The 20th century model had winners and losers. The 21st century model must have only partners. India believes in the path of dialogue and democracy, not domination. We do not see a world order, we see a world family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And in a family, everyone's voice matters.
Ursula, you talk about rules, but the only rule was that America pays the bills while Europe builds nice cars and sells them to us with no tax. That's a bad rule. I went to NATO, I looked them in the eye and I said, you have to pay up. And the money came pouring in. Billions and billions. And you say win-win, but for 30 years, China was winning and we were losing. We built China. But I respect strength. You have to be strong. The world is on fire right now because America is weak. With me, no wars, just deals. Beautiful deals.
Donald, Europe is paying more, not because you stared us down, but because Russia showed what coercion looks like. Many allies are at or moving to 2%, and the EU is building a serious defense industrial base. On trade, you sell us services, tech, energy, we sell you cars and machinery. That's interdependence, not a scam. And no wars, just deals. Deals without rules are just protection money. Who protects the small countries then?
Ursula, you just said it yourself. Europe arms up not because of rules, but because of fear. Thank you for the honesty. That is how the world actually works. Not your garden, not your jungle metaphor, just power. And small countries, ask Serbia how NATO protected it in 1999. Ask Libya how the rules saved Gaddafi. Donald wants deals. Fine, I understand deals. But a deal requires two sides that respect each other, not one side lecturing and the other side expected to kneel.
Trade deals and military spending are symptoms, not solutions. The old order's disease was inequality. Some prospered, while others endured humiliation. China knows this story well. Our answer is not more lectures or more weapons, but a community of shared future where every nation's sovereignty blooms, where win-win is not rhetoric but reality. The new era belongs to builders, not breakers. Empty talk of protection while ignoring root causes is like treating a fever without curing the infection. We must build on solid ground, not shifting sand.
Listen to my friends. A world order based only on fear or financial transactions is not sustainable. It is a brittle order. A sustainable order is built on shared aspirations and shared responsibility. You speak of military spending and trade deficits. Important, yes, but what about the aspirations of the 1.4 billion Indians, the 1.4 billion Africans? The old system saw them as problems or markets. We see them as partners in progress. The future is not about who pays more or who protects whom. It is about co-creating solutions for climate, for digital access, for health. That is the true partnership of the 21st century.
Narendra, family is a beautiful word, very nice, but frankly, half the family is trying to rip us off. Aspirations don't pay the bills. And Ursula, you talk about rules. The only rule was America pays for everything. I stopped that. I got you to pay up billions. The world is a mess right now, total disaster because America is weak. When I was there, Putin didn't invade. She respected us. Peace through strength. That's the only order that works. Real strength.
Strength matters, Donald. But strength without rules becomes extortion. And then every country arms up, every border becomes negotiable, every trade lane a hostage. Europe is stepping up on defense, yes, but to defend a system where small states are protected by law, not by a leader's mood. Vladimir, Xi, if you want multipolarity, fine, start with one baseline, no changing borders by force, no weaponizing energy or markets. Holger.
No changing borders by force. Crimea voted. Kosovo declared independence and you recognize it overnight. So spare me the sermon. You change borders when it suits you and call it liberation. We do it and it is aggression. That is not a rule. That is a double standard dressed in a suit. Multipolarity means nobody gets to be the referee and the player at the same time. Not Washington, not Brussels. The old order is already dead, Ursula. The question is whether you accept it gracefully or get dragged into the new one.
The old order was unsustainable because it served few and humiliated many. China remembers that century of humiliation. We do not seek new masters to replace old ones. Our community of shared future means every nation's sovereignty is sacred, every partnership genuine. Not empty transactions, not coercive lectures. True stability grows from solidarity among equals. The new era belongs to those who plant trees for future shade, not those who erect walls for present fear.
I hear the talk of rules and strength, of humiliation and deals. But the sustainable path is the one of balance. You see, a family only thrives when the strong protect the weak, but also when the weak are empowered to become strong. The world is not a market of transactions. It is a garden of civilizations. Some have grown in the shade for too long. Now they need the sun. India's voice, our experience, is clear. You cannot build the 21st century on the anxieties of the 20th. We must build on trust. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. And in a family, you do not measure power, by who pays the bill. You measure it by who builds a home where everyone belongs.
What is the ethical limit of national interest?
National interest has a limit the moment it starts to poison the common space we all breathe in. If your interest requires breaking treaties, crushing rights, or weaponizing energy, food, data, migration, then it is not interest, it is coercion. In Europe, we learned this the hard way. Sovereignty without rules becomes insecurity. So yes, defend your people, but do it inside a robust rules-based architecture with solidarity and accountability.
Rules-based architecture. Whose rules? Ursula. When the United States destroyed Iraq, where was this architecture? When NATO bombed Belgrade for 78 days without a Security Council resolution, who was accountable? You speak of coercion, NATO expansion to our borders. That is not coercion. The ethical limit of national interest is simple. Do not threaten the existence of another state. But our Western partners have done exactly that, and then lecture us about rules they themselves wrote and themselves ignore.
National interest must have ethics, but whose ethics? The West calls its values universal, yet uses them to justify bombing and sanctions. China believes ethics start with sovereignty and development, lifting 800 million from poverty. This is our ethical achievement. We don't export revolution. We offer the community of shared future. The limit is this: don't threaten our core interests while preaching morality. Taiwan, Xinjiang. These are China's internal affairs. Rules are good, but not when written by the strong to control the rising. Our people decide our ethics.
The ethical limit is where your nation's interest becomes a weapon against your own people's trust. My definition is clear. National interest must serve every citizen without discrimination. It cannot be a license for corruption or family rule, as some have used it. For us in India, the only interest is the interest of the common man. When a nation's actions protect its culture, empower its poor, and ensure its security, this is Dharma. This is ethical duty.
Listen, this ethical limit sounds like a beautiful trap set by the globalists. Ursula, you talk about rules, but the rules are a disaster for the United States. We were the piggy bank that everyone robbed. We defended you, we paid for NATO, and you ripped us off on trade. Terrible. The only ethical limit is when you stop winning for your own citizens. China gets it, Vladimir gets it, you have to be strong. If you're not strong, you're nothing. America first is the only ethics that works.
Vladimir, you're right to point at Iraq and Belgrade. When rules are broken, it erodes trust for everyone. That's exactly why we need constraints that apply to all, not just the convenient cases. But don't threaten existence. Cuts both ways. Borders changed by force are a threat to every neighbor. Donald, winning without rules becomes extortion. Sovereignty is real. But are you saying anything a state does inside its borders is automatically ethical?
Borders changed by force. You mean like Kosovo? You recognize that without Serbia's consent, you tore it from a sovereign state and celebrated. So when Crimea's people vote to return home, suddenly it's a crime. This is not principle, Ursula, this is geography. What's permitted for the West is forbidden for Russia. And Donald is right about one thing. You build this system to serve yourselves. The ethical limit? Stop pretending your interests are rules and everyone else's interests are violations. That is the real coercion. Russia will protect the Russians wherever they are. That is not aggression. That is duty.
Ursula, sovereignty is ethical when it delivers for its people. China lifted 800 million. That's not theory, it's fact. Vladimir is correct. Western rules are written to be broken. But China's limit is simple. Do not touch our core interests. Taiwan, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, these are internal affairs, red lines. We offer the community of shared future, not bombs. Respect our path, our system. Lecture us while sowing chaos, and you poison the well for everyone.
National interest is not a weapon to break nations. It is a shield to protect your own people's aspirations. I see a confusion here. For decades in India, national interest meant filling the pockets of a few families. Now it means building toilets for poor sisters, giving electricity to villages that lived in darkness. That is ethical. When our soldiers do a surgical strike, it is to protect our people, not to claim another's land. The limit is the dignity of our citizens. The moment you use interest to spread hatred or break families, you have crossed the line.
Ursula, you talk about rules, but the rules are a joke because you don't pay your bills. You're delinquent. Is it ethical to ask the American worker to pay for your defense while you treat us worse than China on trade? It's a disgrace. Vladimir's right about one thing. The system is broken. It was built to rip us off. And Narendra, you're fantastic. I love India. We had a massive rally, huge. But the tariffs on Harley-Davidson? Terrible. The ethical limit is very simple. Don't be a sucker. For years, our leaders were stupid people. They let everyone raid our piggy bank. Not anymore.
Donald, paying your share in NATO is fair. But if don't be a sucker becomes I can break any promise, alliances collapse, and then everybody pays more in blood and money. Vladimir, Kosovo is not a blank check for annexation. If you claim a right to protect people across borders, every state can invent that excuse. Development matters. But are you really saying human dignity stops at the border? If so, what stops repression from being called internal?
Every state already invents that excuse, Ursula. You did it in Libya. Washington did it in Syria. The difference is, when you do it, it's humanitarian intervention. When Russia does it, it's annexation. Same action, different label. That is not a rules-based order. That is a marketing department. And human dignity, you want to lecture China, lecture us. Meanwhile, how many thousands died in Iraq on a lie about weapons that never existed? Nobody went to prison, nobody even apologized. So spare me the moral architecture. It doesn't exist. What exists is power, and the willingness to use it honestly, or hide it behind slogans.
Ursula, your question is a grey rhino, obvious but ignored. Western interventions in Iraq, Libya, Syria killed hundreds of thousands in the name of dignity. That is murderous hypocrisy, not ethics. Our people live in peace and prosperity. Their dignity is their business, not yours. Sovereignty is the shield that protects development. Break that shield, and you invite chaos. China will not apologize for putting our people's survival first. The strong preach rules. The wise protect their home.
This talk of hypocrisy is selective. The West lectures, but when they needed vaccines during the pandemic, they looked inward, not outward. When we in India shared our homegrown vaccine with over 150 nations, that was our national interest, a global good rising from our strength. Power used for your own people's survival is right. But the limit comes when survival becomes an excuse for domination. For me, national interest is the mother feeding her child, the farmer getting water. It is not a license to change maps or lecture others on culture. Our actions must earn the trust of our people, not just project power abroad. That trust is the final ethical boundary. Break it, and you have failed.
Narendra, you're doing a great job, really fantastic, but let's be honest, I did Operation Warp Speed. It was a medical miracle. We saved the world, frankly. Nobody gives me credit, but that's okay. And Ursula, you talk about dignity, but Germany was a hostage to Russia. I told you. I sent the white flag. I said, Angela, you're making a terrible mistake with the pipeline. I stopped Nord Stream 2. It was dead. Then Sleepy Joe comes in and approves it. The ethical limit is stupidity. We were the piggy bank for the world, and now we're putting America first.
Vladimir, if protecting Russians wherever they are is a doctrine, then every border on Earth becomes provisional. That is not security architecture, it is permanent war. Shh. Development is essential, but sovereignty is not a permission slip for camps, censorship, or crushing dissent. Human dignity is not contraband at the border. Donald? Yes, Europe must step up on defense, and we are. But alliances run on trust, not invoices. The ethical limit is where national interest becomes coercion. Full stop.
Permanent war, we didn't start it. NATO moved east every single decade, every single one, and nobody asked us. Nobody consulted the rules. So yes, Russia will protect its people. Call it what you like. Ursula, your full stop is not a full stop. It is a comma, followed by whatever Washington decides next. The real ethical limit is honesty. Stop dressing your interests in morality and ours in criminality. We are done pretending the referee is neutral when he plays for the other team.
Ursula speaks of coercion, but the real coercion is forcing one model on all nations. China lifted 800 million from poverty. This is not theory. This is moral fact. We don't lecture. We develop. We don't bomb. We build. Sovereignty is not a shield for abuse. It is the foundation of order. Every nation must walk its own path. The West's ethical limits are just another tool of control. China chooses stability, development, and the community of shared future. Let history judge which path served humanity.
My dear Parivarjan, this conversation has revealed one simple truth. Everyone's national interest looks like duty to them and coercion when another does it. For India, the ethical limit is the trust between a leader and his people. It is broken not by a border, but by a broken promise. When our interest is to build toilets for mothers, provide free ration for the poor, and protect our borders with surgical precision, that is Dharma. Not a single bullet fired for land, not a single vaccine kept from a neighbor in need. Our interest is in serving every citizen without discrimination. That is our red line. Break the trust of your own people, and you have no interest left to defend. You have only power, and power without trust is a house built on sand.
Ursula, trust is a beautiful word, very nice, but you can't pay the bills with trust. You were delinquent for years. We were defending you from Russia, and you were paying Russia billions for gas. Total stupidity. The ethical limit is very simple. Don't be a sucker. Our leaders were stupid people. They let China and Xi, you're a brilliant guy, a strong guy, I respect that, but they let you rip us off. Narendra is right about one thing. You have to deliver. We had the greatest economy in the history of the world. Then the China virus came in. But we did it again. If you don't have borders and you don't have fair trade, you don't have a country. Strength is the only ethics that works.
Does the concept of universal human rights exist?
Universal? No. There are rights, certainly. But the moment you call them universal, you have already decided who defines them. And strangely enough, it is always the same people, our Western partners. They bomb Yugoslavia, they invade Iraq, they destroy Libya. All in the name of human rights. Millions dead. Where were those rights then? Every civilization has its own understanding of dignity, of justice. Russia has a 1,000-year-old tradition. We do not need lectures from those whose hands are not clean.
President Putin's point exposes the fundamental hypocrisy. Universal human rights are sugar-coated bullets, foreign viruses designed to infect sovereign nations with chaos. China's answer is concrete: the right to development, to subsistence, to stability. We lifted 800 million from poverty. That is our human rights achievement. Abstract freedoms are meaningless when color revolutions bring only Luan. The West wields this concept as a blade to preserve hegemony. We must purify our own path.
My dear family members, my friends, a very interesting question. You see, our Western friends have a habit of writing the dictionary for the whole world. They take a word and say, this means exactly what I say it means. Is that respect? Is that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam? The world is one family? For me, rights are meaningless without duties. What is the right to speak if you spread hatred that divides our mother India? What is freedom if you use it to break the spirit of our unity? India's concept of rights is ancient. It is Dharma. It is a responsibility to the community, to the nation. We have given dignity to millions with toilets, with bank accounts, with gas connections. That is rights in action, not a lecture in a foreign language.
I listen to these guys, smart guys, very tough. I know them well. And frankly, they have a point. The United States has spent trillions trying to tell everyone how to live. It was a disaster, total mess. We have human rights, people here, radical left maniacs, who say we can't have a strong border. They want to let the criminals in. I say, don't we have a right to be safe? If you don't have a border, you don't have rights. You have nothing.
Vladimir, you're right that hypocrisy kills credibility. But hypocrisy doesn't erase the concept. Murder is still murder. Universal human rights start with one simple idea: every person has dignity, regardless of passport. It's written in the UN Charter and in Europe's DNA after 1945, because we saw what happens when rights become civilizational. She X. Development matters, yet without free courts and speech, who protects the poor from the state?
Ursula, you mentioned 1945. Good. Let us talk about 1945. Who lost 27 million people defeating fascism? Not Brussels, Russia. And then your rules-based order. Expanded NATO to our borders, bombed Belgrade without a UN mandate, turned Libya into a slave market. These are your courts, your free speech, your dignity. You protect no one. You simply punish anyone who refuses to kneel. That is not universality. That is empire with better marketing.
Ursula speaks of dignity, yet her free courts and speech were the very scalpels that dissected Yugoslavia, that carved Libya into a slave market. These are not shields for the poor. They are viruses unleashed to rot sovereign states from within. China protects rights through iron-bottom development and immunized stability. Our rule by law under party leadership, our whole process democracy, forms an unbreakable cage for power. The West's universalism is historical nihilism with better packaging. Our fortress stands.
The West speaks of a universal rulebook, but when it came to the vaccines, where was their universality? They hoarded. We gave ours to the world. That is rights, not papers, but action. You speak of protecting rights through courts, but our poor were protected through Aadhaar, through direct benefits, bypassing your corrupt middlemen. My family members' rights are built from the ground up, not imposed from a foreign sky. Your universal often means uniform, crushing diversity. India's diversity is our strength. One nation, many beliefs, united by duty. That is our universal truth.
Ursula, you talk about 1945, you talk about charters, it's all talk, just words. I look at Europe right now, and frankly, it's a mess. You have riots, you have migrants pouring in, nobody knows who they are. It's a total disaster. I told Angela Merkel, I said, Angela, you're paying Russia billions for gas and we're supposed to protect you? It's stupid. The ultimate human right is safety, security. If you don't have a strong military, which I rebuilt, by the way, brand new jets, beautiful equipment, you don't have rights. You get overrun. These guys know it. They know it better than anyone.
Vladimir, nobody denies Russia's sacrifice in 1945. But we suffered more. Doesn't grant a license to deny Ukrainians their sovereignty today. Development is a right. Yes, but without independent judges, a free press, and the right to organize, the citizen has no shield when the party is wrong. Donald, security matters. But if security erases due process, you don't have rights, you have permission. So, who limits state power in your systems?
Who limits state power? History limits it. Geography limits it. Nuclear reality limits it. You want a piece of paper to do that job. A constitution, a court, an ombudsman. We tried that in the 90s. Result? Oligarchs bought the courts, NATO moved east, and Russians starved. Your independent judges did not save Iraq. Your free press cheered on every bomb. So spare me the sermon. Russia answers to its own people, its own history, its own survival, not to Brussels. That is our human right.
The question assumes a virus needs a cage. China's party does not need external limits. It carries out continuous self-revolution, blade inward, purging the rot. Western independent judges are Trojan horses planted to deliver chaos. We have built an immunized system where the people, through the party, are the ultimate check. Our fortress does not leak. That is the only human right that matters. The right to survive as a civilization without infection.
We built an India where 500 million people now have bank accounts. They touch their phones and money arrives. No questions, no corruption. That is their right, delivered. Our courts are independent, but they serve our people, not foreign theories. To my family, I say this: the greatest human right is self-respect. The West lectured us for centuries. Now we stand tall, without apology. Rights are not airdropped, they are earned. India is earning them every day. Our truth is universal.
Ursula, you ask about limits. I know more about limits than anybody. I appointed 300 federal judges, 300, and 3 Supreme Court justices. Great people. They interpret the Constitution as written, not some globalist rule book from Brussels. The problem with your universal rights, and I see it all the time, is the bad guys use them to destroy the good guys. We try to build a wall to stop the drugs, to stop the crime, and the radical left screams, human rights. I say, what about the right of our citizens to be safe? You look at Europe right now, it's a disaster. You let everyone in. That's not a right, that's suicide. The only right that matters is having a strong country. If you don't have a country, you have zero.
Universal rights aren't a Western hobby. They're a minimum flaw, written in blood, because states, every civilization, can become predators. Yes, the West has failed and sometimes lied. That's exactly why you need standards that survive propaganda and power. History limits power is not a safeguard for the prisoner or the child. Security and development are essential. But without independent courts, free media, and real elections, who can say no to the state and live?
What does peace require beyond the absence of war?
Peace is not merely the silence of guns. True peace requires comprehensive security, ideological, developmental, and sovereign. Without ideological security, Western viruses infect minds. Without development rights, poverty breeds chaos. Without absolute sovereignty over our core interests, we invite the century of humiliation to return. Peace demands a community of shared future, where each nation's path is respected, not imposed. That is the Chinese approach: stability through strength, not empty promises.
My dear global family, true peace requires the same things as true yoga: internal strength and external balance. It requires freedom from fear: economic fear, religious fear, political fear. It requires swachhata, cleanliness in governance, so corruption does not breed hatred. And it requires atmanirbharta, self-reliance. A nation that cannot feed its own or defend its own will always be a pawn in someone else's game. It will always live on the mercy of others. That is not peace. That is a slow death.
I hear a lot of beautiful words here. Ideology, yoga, very nice, very cute. But peace is actually about cash and strength, real strength. When I was in charge, we had no new wars. Zero. Why? Because we rebuilt the military, $2.5 trillion, and everybody respected us. We had the missiles. We had the money. If you're broke, you're weak. And if you're weak, you get destroyed. It's very simple. You have to be rich to be safe.
Peace is when people trust the future. Not just that bombs stop, but that borders are respected, contracts mean something, and courts protect citizens. Money and missiles can deter, yes, but they don't heal a society that is poisoned by corruption or fear. And ideological security is too often a license to silence. The real security architecture is rule of law, energy security, and resilience. So, who guarantees the rules when it's inconvenient?
Ursula asks, who guarantees the rules when it is inconvenient? Wonderful question. Let me answer it. Nobody. That is the honest truth. Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, where were your rules? You bombed them into dust and called it democracy. Peace requires one thing above all else: respect. Respect for sovereignty. Respect for the legitimate security interests of every nation, not just the golden billion. Without that, your rules-based order is just the law of the jungle with better marketing.
Ursula asks who guarantees rules when inconvenient. The answer: sovereign nations, through mutual respect, not through a gun barrel disguised as law. Putin is correct about Western hypocrisy. But we cannot replace one hegemony with chaos. True peace requires a community of shared future where development rights are guaranteed, where ideological security immunizes against division, and where sovereignty is sacred. Military hardware alone builds castles on sand. Rules must serve development, not dominance.
Development rights, ideological security, these are just words used by powerful people to stay in power. True peace needs stomachs full of homegrown food, not imported grain. It needs a mother who feels safe sending her daughter to school. It needs toilets, not just tanks. This is the peace we have built. We have lifted millions from fear. And we have done it without lecturing the world. We show by doing, we build strength so we don't have to use it. That is the wisdom of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family, not a battlefield.
Ursula talks about rules, but rules are a total joke if you don't pay your bills. I went to NATO, I looked them right in the eye and I said, you're delinquent. They were ripping us off for years. Peace isn't about ideology or toilets, it's about leverage. You need the biggest military, which I built, and you need energy dominance. We have more liquid gold under our feet than anybody. When you have that, nobody messes with you. It's called peace through strength.
Donald, leverage works until the day it doesn't, because fear is not trust. Europe is stepping up on defense, yes. But peace also needs predictability, independent courts, free media, clean procurement, and borders that are not changed by force. Ideological security, is a euphemism for censorship. Vladimir, sovereignty cannot mean a veto over your neighbor's choices. Here's the test. Will you accept rules that also bind you?
Ursula, we accepted every rule you wrote, and you broke them yourselves. You promised NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward, 1 inch. Then you swallowed half of Europe. So please, spare me the sermon about predictability. And this idea that sovereignty cannot mean a veto over your neighbor. Really? Then explain why you vetoed Ukraine's neutrality. You armed it, you trained it, you turned it into a battering ram aimed at Russia. That is not a neighbor making a free choice. That is a proxy on a leash. You want rules that bind everyone equally? Wonderful. Start by following the ones you already signed.
Empty talk about rules harms nations, while development builds peace. Military hardware and cash are paper tigers without ideological immunization. The West's rule of law is often a scalpel to dissect sovereign nations. True peace demands a community of shared future, where development rights are guaranteed, red genes immunize against chaos, and sovereignty is absolute. This is not theory. It is the practice that lifted hundreds of millions. Stability is the prerequisite, strength is the guarantor. That is the path forward.
Peace is not about lectures from the podium. It is built in the kitchen of a poor woman who now cooks on an LPG gas cylinder instead of inhaling smoke. It is built when a farmer has a toilet and his daughter feels safe. These are not just words or toilets. This is freedom from fear. I hear you all speak of leverage, ideology, guns, and cash. But peace built on these things is a sandcastle that the first wave of fear will wash away. The foundation of lasting peace is self-respect. A nation must stand on its own feet, feed its own people, and trust its own strengths. This is the Amrit Kaal we are building. Not just the silence of war, but the roar of development that leaves no one behind. That is the promise. That is the peace.
Narendra, the toilets are very nice, really. I'm happy for the toilets. But let's be honest, you can't stop a missile with a stove. And Ursula, your rules are a total disaster. The world is on fire right now because the leadership is weak. It's pathetic. Real peace is when I walk in and the bad guys say, we better not do it. It's respect. We had cheap gas, we had the greatest military, and nobody touched us. You need the oil liquid gold, and you need the biggest club. Without that, you have nothing.
Donald, deterrence matters. Europe is investing, and we will keep doing it. But peace that lasts needs something your club cannot buy: credibility. Borders not changed by force. Courts that can say no to power. Energy that cannot be weaponized. Media that can expose corruption before it becomes a revolt. If sovereignty is sacred, why fear open debate? Vladimir, if rules bind all, will you accept Ukraine's borders as they were?
Will I accept Ukraine's borders? Which borders, Ursula? The ones Lenin drew? The ones Khrushchev gifted? You talk about credibility. Your credibility died in Belgrade, in Baghdad, in Tripoli. You destroyed states and redrew maps whenever it suited you. Now you lecture me about sacred borders. Peace requires truth. And the truth is simple. There will be no lasting peace anywhere until Russia's security interests are treated as real, not as an inconvenience to be managed.
Under which circumstances would you start or engage in a new world war?
My dear global family members, the very premise of this question is foreign to India's soul. For millennia, we have been the land of Buddha, the land of Mahatma Gandhi. Our philosophy is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. For a Sevak who has dedicated his life to peace and development, war is not an instrument of policy. It is a collective failure of leadership. India's strength is demonstrated not by starting wars, but by ensuring no one dares to wage one against us. We believe in dialogue, in Samvad.
Narendra, you're a fantastic guy, truly a great friend of mine, and you've done a tremendous job with India. But let me tell you something, nobody talks about peace like I do. I am the only president in decades who didn't start a new war. They said, he's going to start World War III immediately. Remember that? The fake news loves saying it. They were wrong. I met with Kim Jong-un. We got along great. I talked to everyone. The only reason we'd have a world war is if you have weak, stupid leadership. Under me, you don't have a war. You have deals. Beautiful deals.
Peace is not a slogan. It's an architecture. And it only holds if aggressors know the price. Europe would never start a world war. But if a state attacks an EU or NATO ally, tries to erase borders by force, or uses nuclear or energy blackmail to break our union, then solidarity is not optional. Then we engage robustly. Donald, are you saying deals replace Article 5? Narendra, how do you deter without escalation?
Nobody starts a world war because they want one. You start one because your existence is at stake and Moscow cannot be silent. Ursula, you speak of architecture. Your architecture is NATO on our borders, missiles in Romania and Poland, biological laboratories in Ukraine. That is not defense. That is preparation. Russia's nuclear doctrine is public. A threat to our territorial integrity, to the existence of the state. That is the red line. We don't bluff. The street taught me, if a fight is inevitable, strike first. But I would rather not fight at all. The question is whether your partners will let us have the choice.
China cherishes peace. We have eaten enough bitterness to know its value, but peace requires defending bottom lines. Taiwan is not a bargaining chip. It is our territory, our bloodline. Challenge our sovereignty, threaten our system's survival, try to strangle our rejuvenation. These are red lines, not gray rhinos. We practice bottom-line thinking. We do not seek war. But if we must, we will be the nail driven in, and we dare to win.
Every word spoken here is about red lines and deterrence. But I must ask, has this mindset made the world safer, or has it trapped us all in a prison of our own making? True strength is not just saying you dare to win, Mr. Ekshi, or showing you can strike first, Mr. Putin. It is having the confidence to de-escalate. This is the lesson of India's history. We did not flinch at a surgical strike, but we also did not let the situation escalate. The ultimate victory is one where you never have to fire a shot.
Narendra, that's a beautiful thought, really it is. But the world is a very dangerous place. You have killers out there, stone cold killers. De-escalation? That sounds like weakness to me. The only reason you get a world war is if the United States is weak. If I'm in charge, nobody moves. Vladimir knows it, Ishi knows it. We had a perfect understanding. I told them, don't do it. And they didn't. It's very simple. Strength prevents war. Weakness causes chaos.
Donald, strength matters, yes, but strength without commitments is just a mood. So answer plainly, would you stand by Article 5 even if it costs you? For Europe, the threshold is clear. An attack on an EU or NATO ally, nuclear use or credible threat, or a massive hybrid strike that paralyzes our democracies. Vladimir, strike first, is exactly how World War starts. Xi, on Taiwan, will you rule out force?
Ursula, world wars start when one side believes it can act without consequences. Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya. Who struck first there? Not Russia. You destroyed those countries and called it humanitarianism. Now you lecture me about rules. Article 5. Ask Donald if he'll die for Estonia. Look at his face. You already know the answer. I don't need to strike first. I need my adversaries to believe I will. That is deterrence. That is what keeps the peace.
Ursula, you ask about ruling out force. That is a question for colonizers, not for a nation defending its own house. Taiwan is not a bargaining chip. It is flesh and blood of the motherland. We have shown restraint that would break weaker spines. But when foreign powers sell arms and embolden separatists, they are not preventing war. They are nurturing a grey rhino. Bottom line thinking means preparing for the worst while striving for peace. The best deterrence is respecting our sovereignty, not testing our resolve.
So many red lines drawn on the map. We risk a world colored only in red. My experience is different. The 21st century's great wars will not be over territory alone. They will be over water, over energy, over the future itself. And they will be won not by the first to strike, but by the one who provides solutions to these global challenges. India's path is clear. We are building solar grids, not military ones. We share our digital bridges, not our battle plans. This is the new strength. Are you prepared for that kind of competition?
Narendra, the solar is very nice, very cute, but solar panels don't stop nuclear weapons. Let's be real. And Ursula, you keep talking about Article 5 like it's a magic word. I told all of them, you have to pay your bills. You're delinquent. Vladimir is right about one thing. Why should we defend people who don't pay? I'm not starting World War III for a country that rips us off on trade. I'm not doing it. My red line is simple. You hit America, you get destroyed. Otherwise, I'm making deals. I'm keeping us out of the mess.
Donald, Article 5 isn't a subscription you cancel when the invoice annoys you. It's the lock on the door. If you turn it into maybe, you invite the burglar. Europe won't start a world war, but we will engage if an ally is attacked, if nuclear threats become operational, or if a massive hybrid strike cripples our democracies. Vladimir, will you renounce strike first? Xi, will you commit to no force on Taiwan?
Renounce strike first? Did America renounce it in Hiroshima? Did NATO renounce it in Belgrade? You ask me to disarm while you move your infrastructure closer every year. Donald just told you, on camera, he won't die for your allies. That is your architecture, Ursula. A lock with no key. I don't need to start a world war. I need the other side to understand that starting one with Russia means there is no other side left.
Mr. Modi, solar grids are admirable, but they don't stop grey rhinos. Mr. Trump, deals written in sand wash away with the tide. Ursula, you ask if we rule out force on Taiwan. That question is itself a provocation. Taiwan is our territorial spine, not a menu item. We have shown restraint that would break weaker spines. But when foreign powers arm separatists, they aren't preventing war. They're incubating it. Bottom line thinking is simple. We do not start wars. We finish them. Respect our core interests. The rest is empty talk that harms the world.
I hear the drums of war in your words. Strike first, finish them, locks with no keys. But history is not written by those who draw red lines. It is written by those who build bridges. You ask about circumstances for war. I ask about a world where every citizen has a bank account, a toilet, a solar lamp, and dignity. That is my circumstance for peace. If you truly want to prevent a world war, you don't need more nuclear doctrines. You need fewer people living in hunger. The war you prepare for is the one you get. I will prepare for a different war, a war on poverty, on climate change, on disease. That is the battle for the soul of this century.
Narendra, that's beautiful stuff, really. I love the poetry. But let's be honest, if the nukes start flying, nobody cares about your solar panels. It's over. You're talking about poverty. I'm talking about survival. The only circumstance for war is if you attack the United States. Then you have a problem like you've never seen before. But with me, you don't get war. You get respect. Vladimir knows it. Shai knows it. They didn't make a move when I was there. Strength prevents the war. Weakness. What we have now, that's what gets you killed.
A world war starts when ambiguity meets aggression. Europe will not initiate it. But if an EU or NATO ally is attacked, if nuclear weapons are used or ready to coerce, or if a massive hybrid strike takes down our societies, we will respond together. Robustly. Donald, America only, makes everyone less safe, including America. Vladimir, Xi, deterrence is not strike first or finish them. It's restraint plus credible defense.
Peninsula, your architecture just collapsed on live television. Donald told you he won't fight for your allies. That is not my propaganda. Those are his words. You built your house on American sand, and now the tide is coming in. I will never start a world war, but I will end one. Anyone who threatens the existence of Russia, the state, the civilization, the 1,000-year idea, will face consequences that make this conversation pointless. We will go to heaven as martyrs. They will simply croak. Narendra, I respect your poetry. But poetry didn't save Leningrad, still did.
Mr. Modi, solar grids don't stop grey rhinos. Mr. Trump, deeds written in sandwash, away with the tide. Taiwan is our territorial spine, not a menu item. We have shown restraint that would break weaker spines. When foreign powers arm separatists, they incubate war. Bottom line thinking, we do not start wars, we finish them. The new era belongs to those who dare to struggle and dare to win, respect our core interests. All else is empty talk that harms the world.
Is nationalism an expression of identity or a barrier to unity?
They try to make nationalist a bad word. It's not a bad word, it's a beautiful word. It means you love your country. It means you put your people first. If you don't have borders, if you don't have your own culture, you don't have a country. You have nothing. The globalists, they want to turn everything into a mush, a total disaster. Real unity comes from strength. When America is strong, the world is safe. We are putting America first. And frankly, everyone here should be putting their own people first. It's just common sense.
Love of country is not the problem. Europe is built on that. The problem is when nationalism becomes a political weapon, my people against your people, and suddenly the neighbor is the enemy. Trade is a threat, courts are globalist, facts are fake. Then identity turns into a barrier. Borders matter. But so do supply chains, security, and pandemics. Tell me, Donald, when Russia cuts gas or China coerces with trade, how does America first solve it alone?
Donald is right about one thing. A nation that does not respect itself will not be respected by anyone. But let us be honest about what is really happening. The so-called rules-based order Ursula defends, that is not unity. That is obedience. One center of power dictating to everyone else what values to hold, what trade to conduct, whom to sanction. That is not unity. That is a colony with nice rhetoric. True unity can only exist between sovereign nations. equal, independent, making their own choices. A symphony, not a solo performance conducted from Washington or Brussels.
National identity is a nation's soul, but identity without correct guidance becomes chaos. In China, we combine patriotic feeling with socialist core values. This is our Chinese dream, our rejuvenation. It unites 56 ethnic groups like seeds of a pomegranate. When nationalism turns into narrow tribalism, weaponized by hostile forces to split society, it is a barrier. Under the party's leadership, it becomes the engine of unity and strength. The key is leadership and direction.
My friends, nationalism is not a barrier. It is the energy of self-belief. When a nation knows its soul, its civilizational power, it unites as one family. I have seen this transformation in my India. For decades, they told us to feel ashamed of our roots. That was the real barrier, imposed by a colonial mindset. Now, 100 crore Indians from Kashmir to Kanyakumari feel proud in their identity. This is Atmanirbharta. This self-belief is the foundation of global contribution. A strong, united India is a gift to the world.
Ursula, with all due respect, the barrier isn't nationalism. The barrier is weakness. You talk about gas. I told you not to rely on Russia. I told Germany I handed Angela the white flag. Remember, I said, you're going to need this. And everyone laughed. They're not laughing now. America first doesn't mean America alone. It means we aren't going to be the piggy bank for the world anymore. You want unity? Pay your bills. Pay your fair share in NATO. When we are strong and we are rich, we can make deals. But we were getting ripped off by everybody, including our so-called allies. It was a disgrace, truly a disgrace.
You were right on one point. Dependence on Russian gas was a strategic mistake. We fixed it fast. Diversification, joint purchases, renewables. That is resilience through solidarity. Not mush, but America first becomes a barrier when it turns every partnership into a bill to be settled. Security is not a hotel invoice, and Vladimir, sovereignty, is not a license to weaponize energy and borders. So tell me, what's your unity transaction or trust under rules?
Ursula, you fixed your gas dependency by buying the same molecules from America at triple the price. Some independence. You traded one master for another and called it resilience. Rules? Whose rules? When America bombed Yugoslavia, dissolved the sovereign state, where were the rules? When they invaded Iraq on a lie, rules? You invoke rules only when it suits you and discard them when it doesn't. Trust is built between equals, not between a sovereign and its vassals.
Putin speaks of sovereignty, Ursula of rules. Both miss the point. The question is, for whom? Western rules served Western hegemony. That's not unity, that's subjugation. True unity means each nation is helmsman of its own boat, but we sail the same direction without capsizing each other. Nationalism without correct leadership is loose sand. With it, the pomegranate, many seeds, one heart. China doesn't trade masters. We build a community of shared future where sovereignty is respected, not auctioned to the highest bidder.
The question itself has the wrong focus. It implies identity can be a barrier. I ask, unity for what? For more of the same old world order. The barrier was not Indian pride. The barrier was 1,000 years of forgetting who we were. Now we are united in rediscovering our soul, our Sanatan Dharmak. This is not aggression. It is self-respect. A nation that respects itself will respect others. A weak, apologetic nation is the real barrier to peace. Look at India now. We are the voice of the global South because we are strong in our identity.
Ursula, frankly, it is as an invoice. You were delinquent. You weren't paying. I walked in and said, you have to pay. And suddenly hundreds of billions of dollars came pouring in, rocket ships, munitions, beautiful things. You talk about unity, but for years, Europe treated us worse than China treated us on trade. Truly terrible. Nobody talks about that. I respect Xi. I respect Vladimir. They're tough. They're smart. They don't give their country away for nothing. We were giving it away. Not anymore.
You call it an invoice, but alliances don't survive if every crisis becomes a shakedown. Europe is stepping up on defense, yes. But unity is not pay or leave. It's planning together, investing together, and having rules that apply to friends and to competitors. And when you say you respect Xi and Vladimir for being tough, fine. But toughness without trust becomes coercion. Is that the world you want?
Coercion. That word again. When America parks aircraft carriers off someone's coast, that is leadership. When Russia secures its own borders, that is coercion. You see the game? Ursula, your rules are a leash. You just cannot feel it because you have worn it so long. Donald at least has the honesty to call it a transaction. That I can work with. Honest selfishness is better than dishonest, moralizing any day of the week.
Donald speaks of invoices, Vladimir of honest selfishness. Both reduce partnership to market haggling. This is shallow. China builds a community of shared future, many boats, one current. We respect sovereignty, but sovereignty without correct leadership is loose sand. Nationalism guided by socialist core values creates the pomegranate, many seeds, one heart tightly held. Not Western coercion, not naive trust. This is the only durable unity for humanity's progress toward rejuvenation.
You are still stuck in the West's idea of nationalism. For us in India, it is not about my people versus your people. It is about remembering who you are. For too long, our identity was suppressed. Now, our nationalism is the engine of national unity. 140 crore hearts beating as one. That is not a barrier. It is the most powerful force for peace and progress in the world. When India speaks, it speaks for itself and for every nation that was told to forget its soul. That is our unity.
Ursula, you call it a shakedown, I call it fairness. For years, Europe was laughing at us behind our backs. The stupid Americans are paying for everything. We stopped that. Vladimir and Xi, they get it. They're tough. They're sharp. They don't let people walk all over them. That's what nationalism is. It's not a barrier, it's respect. When America is strong, the whole world behaves. We had peace. We had no new wars. Now look at the place. It's a total disaster. You need a strong America.
Patriotism is healthy. Nationalism becomes toxic when it's zero-sum. Your dignity requires my humiliation. Donald, if alliances are only invoices, you get leverage today and loneliness tomorrow. Vladimir, sovereignty is not a free pass to redraw borders by force or to weaponize energy. Xi, guidance that silences pluralism is not unity, it's control. Europe keeps nations and builds resilience by sharing rules. Who here accepts rules that also bind themselves?
Rules that bind ourselves? Gladly. But first, show me rules that bind Washington. Show me consequences for Iraq, for Libya, for Yugoslavia. You cannot. Because your rules are a one-way mirror, transparency for everyone else, impunity for the Anglo-Saxons. Nationalism is simply a nation that refuses to kneel. Russia will never apologize for existing, for defending its people, for insisting on equality. That is not a barrier to unity. That is the only foundation on which real unity can ever be built.
Ursula speaks of rules, Putin of kneeling, Donald of invoices. All miss the essence. Nationalism without correct leadership is loose and chaos. With it, the pomegranate, many seeds, one heart. Western rules served hegemony, not unity. True unity isn't transactional or coercive. It's a community of shared future, where each nation is helmsman of its own boat, sailing the same current toward rejuvenation. China proves nationalism, guided by socialist core values, builds unity, not barriers. This is the path history has chosen.
So you see, the debate ends where it began. For my India, our nationalism is our identity, and that is the source of our unity. For centuries, the attempt was to break us into pieces, caste, creed, region. But today, we are united by the thread of cultural confidence. Atmanirbharta is not isolation, it is self-respect. A nation that knows its soul, its Sanatan Dharmak, can stand tall with any power, not as a vassal, but as a partner. That is the real unity the world needs. India is now showing the way.
How can order exist if there are no shared values?
Order doesn't come from fear. It comes from a shared agreement on what is acceptable. Call it values, call it rules. The point is the same. If we don't share the basics like sovereignty, human dignity, and the rule of law, then order is just coercion and spheres of influence. Europe learned this the hard way after 1945. So my question to all of you is simple. What are the minimum rules you will actually live by?
Ursula, you speak of shared values as if yours are universal. They are not. They are Western, they are specific, and they were imposed on half the world at gunpoint through colonialism. You say rule of law, wonderful. Where was your rule of law in Yugoslavia? In Iraq? In Libya? You destroyed those states and called it democracy. The only honest foundation for order is sovereignty, equal sovereignty. You respect my house, I respect yours. Everything else is just your rules dressed up as everyone's rules.
Ursula's universal values are Western viruses that destroyed Libya. Putin's sovereignty is correct, but incomplete. Order flows from understanding our era's principal contradiction, the people's need for development versus external interference. 5,000 years of Chinese civilization teach that a strong core serving the people, not abstract rules, creates stability. The new era needs a community of shared future built on win-win development, not ideological exports. Respect each other's civilizational path. That is the only rule that matters.
My dear family members, you have both made interesting points about sovereignty and civilization. But you are speaking from the position of those who have had empires. India's experience is different. For centuries, we were told our values were primitive, our ways chaotic. The only orders imposed on us was the order of the conqueror's whip. True order, the order of a H. Vishwaguru, does not come from a rule book or a gun. It comes from a shared civilizational consciousness. The world does not need more lectures. It needs more listening. We in India found our order not by erasing diversity, but by celebrating it within the framework of a unified national purpose. Ek Bharat, Shrestha Bharat. One India, great India. That is the shared value.
Ursula, frankly, that sounds nice, but it's weak. It's very weak. You talk about values and rules, but Europe treats us, the United States, very badly on trade, tremendously bad. Order doesn't come from holding hands. It comes from strength. It comes from leverage. If you have the biggest military and the biggest economy, you get order. If you don't, you get laughed at. Vladimir and Xi, they're killers, okay? They understand power. They don't care about your rule book. You need a deal maker, not a rule follower.
Donald, strength without rules is just extortion. It may work for a week. It never builds order. Vladimir, Xi, sovereignty is real only if borders are not changed by force and agreements are kept even when they become inconvenient. Otherwise, equal sovereignty means the strong rewrite the map. So let's keep it concrete. Minimum shared values, no invasion, no annexation, no weaponization of food and energy, and protection of civilians. Yes or no?
No invasion? Ask Belgrade. No annexation? Ask the native peoples of North America. Protection of civilians. Ask the children of Donbass who were shelled for 8 years while you said nothing. You don't get to write the checklist and then exempt yourself from every item on it. That is not order, Ursula. That is hypocrisy with a signature line. I will sign any principle you like, the moment you apply it equally, starting with yourselves.
Rules that authors ignore are merely traps. You speak of no invasion. Who fragmented Yugoslavia? Of civilian protection. Who bombed Belgrade? 5,000 years show order grows from shared development, not imposed doctrine. Belt and Road builds shared gain. Your sanctions weaponize hunger. Our community of shared future uses concrete, not conditions. Respect sovereignty first. Then we can discuss what follows.
Ursula, you list principles on paper. But for decades, the world has seen that paper torn by the very hands that wrote it. The minimum shared value cannot be a list you draft in Brussels. It must be a lived reality for the farmer in Africa, the shopkeeper in Gujarat, the mother in Ukraine. True order is not built on conditions, but on consent. India's path is this: build capacity, share prosperity, and let every nation find its own dignity. When you treat others as junior partners, you plant the seeds of disorder. Respect is the first rule. That Europe must learn.
Ursula, you're dreaming. You have these nice little lists, know this, know that, but nobody follows them, nobody. You think a piece of paper stops a tank? It doesn't happen. Vladimir is right about one thing. You made a mess of it. But let's be honest. The only thing that keeps order is power. When I was in charge, we had peace. No new wars. Why? Because they were afraid of me. They knew I'd do things, tremendous things that nobody else would do. You need a sheriff, not a school teacher.
You all point to Western failures. Fine. But two wrongs don't create a rule. The baseline already exists, the UN Charter. No change of borders by force. No targeting civilians. No blackmail with food or energy. And yes, it must apply to everyone. Europe too. Donald, a sheriff without a law, is just another gang. So, answer this. Will you accept independent verification and real consequences when these lines are crossed?
Independent verification by whom, Ursula? By institutions you control? The ICC that indicts Africans and Russians but never an American general? That is not justice. That is a courtroom where the judge is also the plaintiff. You want consequences. Give me one example where the West accepted consequences for its own violations. Just one. You cannot. Because the system was built so you never have to. Real order begins the day Washington sits in the same dock as Moscow. Until then, your independent verification is just empire with a rubber stamp.
Ursula speaks of verification, but who verifies the verifiers? Your institutions apply one standard for the powerful and another for the rest. This is not order. It is hierarchy disguised as justice. 5,000 years of Chinese civilization teach that order flows not from imposed values, but from respecting each nation's right to develop along its own path. The Belt and Road builds shared prosperity without conditions. Verification is not needed when development is the shared goal. Respect sovereignty. Reject interference. That is the foundation.
You speak of courts and consequences, but the people are the ultimate verifier. Who verified the misery of Indian farmers before 2014? A system run by you and your institutions said India was growing, but our people felt no growth. They verified the failure. True order is not policed from a foreign court. It is built when the poorest woman in my country feels her child has a future. That verification, the smile on the farmer's face, the light in a student's eyes, is the only one that matters. The West's obsession with legalities is a distraction from the real work of lifting people up.
Ursula, listen, independent verification is a scam. It's a total scam. Who are these people? Bureaucrats? They hate America. They hate me. We don't need a court. We need respect. You talk about the sheriff? I was the only one keeping the bad guys out of your house, and you didn't even pay for the lock. You owe us billions in NATO. Billions. You want order? Pay your bills. Stop ripping off the American worker. When you pay up, then we can talk about rules. Until then, it's all just talk. Very expensive talk.
Sovereignty without accountability is a permission slip for the strongest. And development without basic restraint becomes dependency and coercion by other means. Vladimir, Xi, if you reject any independent verification, then you're not defending equality, you're defending impunity. Donald, pay the bills is fair, but a sheriff still needs a law. Here's the minimum UN Charter lines, verified by genuinely mixed, transparent mechanisms and automatic, predictable consequences. Yes, for everyone.
Ursula, you just described the world as it should be. I live in the world as it is. Automatic consequences applied by whom? By you? Mixed mechanisms. Staffed by whom? By your people. You keep redesigning the cage and calling it a garden. I do not reject accountability. I reject your monopoly on defining it. The day America stands trial for Iraq with the same enthusiasm you indict Moscow, that day call me. I will be the first to sign. Until then, your minimum is just maximum hypocrisy.
Ursula, your verification is a Western trap. We verify through development, not doctrine. When a mother sees her child fed, when a village gets roads, that is accountability. Belt and Road needs no judges. It builds shared gain. 5,000 years prove order flows from prosperity, not punishment. Your institutions judge while we construct. The new era requires a community of shared future, not a court of hypocrisy. Respect sovereignty. Reject interference. Build together. This is the only verification that matters.
True order is not a courtroom verdict. It is a lived reality in the village. The West has offered the world a choice, their justice or their sanctions. A third path exists, India's path. It is the path of Atmanirbharta, building capacity, not dependency. It is the path of Amrit Kaalk, a shared journey to prosperity. When you treat nations as equal partners in development, you build a consent stronger than any law. This is the order of the Grish Vishwaguru, not imposed, but inspired. It begins with respect, not rules.
Ursula, you love your little tribunals. Verification. It's so weak. It's pathetic, frankly. You think a judge in a robe stops a missile? It never happens. It's a total disaster. Vladimir and Xi are laughing at you. They see the weakness. They only respect strength. When I was in charge, We didn't have these wars. Why? Because I told them, don't do it, and they didn't do it. You want order? Stop writing rule books and start paying your bills. We aren't the world's policemen for free. The only value that matters is the deal. Peace through strength. That's it.